the new 3 through 5 Guidebooks units. We are the ELA content team from the LDOE, and we will be working with you guys throughout this session in order to familiarize yourselves with optional and core activities for teachers, and specifically how you can use these in the new updated materials. So I'm going to give you a moment to read through our session objectives today, and then we'll discuss these in more depth further. So as you can see, our focus for this session is going to be grounded in a better understanding of the 2022 3 through 5 ELA Guidebooks core and optional activities. We'll take some time today to review the different types of activities that are included in the revised units and the best practices for planning using student data. For today's session, you will capture your thinking in a participant guide. I am going to put a link to it in the chat. If you'll click on it, it is going to direct you to make a copy. And also, if you have any questions throughout this session, if you would put them in the chat, someone from LDOE is monitoring it, and we will answer questions as we go.
Let's take a moment and review our agenda for today. We will start the session with an overview of the updated evaluation plan. One change in these updates is the assessment design. Review this chart to see how the assessment plan has been updated. As you can see, the students will be building knowledge to be able to respond to the culminating task, but will no longer have a cold read task nor an extension task. Instead, teachers will use the daily lesson look-fors to monitor student understanding. Each section includes a section diagnostic that will help teachers tailor the daily lessons to meet their students' needs in order to be successful for the culminating task. Now, because the cold read task and the extension task are no longer included in the units, we do recommend, if these are assessments you would like to continue using, that you preview the updates as well as the assessment to ensure that it is still relevant for your students in assessing their knowledge and skills for that section. The assessment path for each unit can look different from classroom to classroom. With the built-in optional activities, teachers are able to choose which optional activities would best benefit their students. Every unit includes lesson look-fors for monitoring student progress, section diagnostics to assess student growth throughout the unit, and a culminating task to evaluate overall understanding to the unit. The updated assessment approach allows teachers to determine core activity supports and core activities and optional activities specific to student needs by monitoring student progress that is embedded into the daily curriculum with knowledge-based and skill-related student look-fors. The lessons in each section are designed to prepare students for the section diagnostic by building content knowledge through reading, writing, and having discussions about complex texts. By monitoring how students are responding to the activities with the lesson look-fors, teachers are able to make informed decisions about which optional activities to include in the lesson and which just-in-time supports to use, which is focused of the day's lesson. Before we dive deeper into our work with the optional and core activities, it's important to understand the design of a specific unit's evaluation plan to help guide our understanding of the core and optional activities included throughout the unit and how they include just-in-time supports to accelerate students. Today's session will revolve around one of the updated third grade units because of WinnDixie. To familiarize yourself with the Louisiana Curriculum Hub, please click on the link in the chat and locate the evaluation plan under the Assessments tab. Thank you, Kenna. So as you can see on the screen, when you get to the Louisiana Curriculum Hub, you will click on Because of WinnDixie, and you will click on Assessments. So this is for 3 through 5. We are using one unit today just to go through what the optional activities and the core supports would look like in a grade level. So we'll be using examples from 3rd grade, but this session is for 3 through 5. It includes all the information that you can apply to any of the 3 through 5 units. So this is the evaluation plan, and this is what you'll be looking to have available. On this evaluation plan, you will see sample lesson look-fors. You will see the section Diagnostics with the culminating task connections. The culminating task directions, the prompt, the rubric, and the exemplar. So if you are a teacher of another grade level and you would like to follow along with your grade level specific evaluation plan, you can do that too, just by clicking on the Assessments tab under Whipping Boy or the Birch Bark House. Now that you've located the evaluation plan for Because of WinnDixie, take the next few minutes to explore the evaluation plan and answer the guiding questions that are listed in section 1 of your participant guide. A link to the evaluation plan is in part 1 of your participant guide. Please be prepared to share your thoughts with the group.
I'm just going to address the comment in the chat from Clara, the question about the sections having diagnostics. So does the culminating task, I'm wondering if it's asking the same thing. So each section does have a diagnostic that is building to the knowledge and skills that students need in order to be successful in the culminating task. So each section has a designated section diagnostic with a checklist that will allow teachers to monitor student understanding before they get to the culminating task at the end of the unit. And that's one of the things that we'll be working on today as part of this session, is how those section diagnostics build to the culminating task and how you can use the information and the data that you have collected throughout the unit to choose core and optional, or to choose core supports and optional activities that can accelerate student learning.
Yes, The section diagnostics do filter for students to be able to get to that culminating task. So the section diagnostics are those little puzzle pieces that teachers would be able to use in order to assess if their students are ready for the culminating task. What you are referring to on that evaluation plan is in that third column. That's the connections to the culminating task. So it's not a culminating task for every single section. It's just the connections to what that assessment is helping students get to.
She said go to the evaluation plan.
There was a question in the chat about, is this a repeat to a recent session? We are reviewing some information from our previous sessions, and we did have a leader-specific session earlier, but this is the first time we are presenting this topic. So just a reminder, in your participant guide, you are currently working on section 1. And you're capturing your thoughts about the knowledge and skills students will need to be successful on the culminating task, and how the section diagnostics are connected to the culminating task. I'm going to go ahead and grab the assessment plan, the evaluation plan, and drop that in the chat. So just give me a couple seconds. I just dropped the link in the chat for you to locate the Because of WinnDixie evaluation plan. For future reference, this evaluation plan is located on the Louisiana Curriculum Hub under the Assessments tab, just so you can find it next time. If you guys have any questions about what you're doing in section 1 of the participant guide, please unmute or put a question in the chat. We have about 2 more minutes. All right, you should be wrapping up section 1 of your participant guide. And if you are just joining us, I'll drop those links in one more time for the participant guide. And the evaluation plan. All right, let's go ahead and look at some of the work that we have done. Kenna, you can go ahead and progress to the next slide. So let's review the culminating task for Because of WinnDixie. In this guidebook unit, students read Because of WinnDixie by Kate DiCamillo and a series of related texts to explore the question, why is it important to have friends that are different from us? Students express their understanding of how the friendship that Opal builds throughout the anchor text develops the theme of the story. I'd like to hear your ideas about the first question. What knowledge and skills do students need on the culminating task? Feel free to unmute and share your responses, or you can put your responses in the chat. What are the knowledge and skills students need on the culminating task? Thank you, Elizabeth. I see theme or central message, writing in paragraphs, identifying details.
We said they need to understand theme, central message, and how relationships change. They need to be able to compare relationships and how they grow and change.
Yes, thank you for sharing. Christy says, analyze character relationships and interactions. Clara saying they clearly need to know what a central message is. Oh, I lost it. Theme is, and how to analyze a text in order to figure that out. They have to be able to know, have knowledge of a paragraph, writing, and how to use text evidence. An introduction and concluding sentence. Character development, unlikely friendships, communities, companionship, theme, central message. Yes, you guys are right on target. A lot of these are some knowledge look fors that you're going to see throughout these sections and lessons. So students will need to be focused in on character development and those relationships throughout the text as well. And also through those related texts, you'll see that there's a lot of focus on relationships. Now let's discuss the second question. How are the section diagnostics connected to the culminating task? Again, you can feel free to unmute to share your response, or you can put it in the chat. Asking questions pertaining to character interaction with each other. On the evaluation plan, if you look at that third column in the section diagnostics section, you will see there are some connections you can pull from as well. Through analyzing Opal's experiences and relationships with the different characters, we can better understand the message of the story and how it is conveyed through those interactions. Thank you.
One thing I noticed about it is it kind of builds. So in the beginning, it's like more of a general understanding. And as it goes deeper into the chapters, we're looking at character specific traits. They start referencing Opal specifically and WinnDixie, versus in the beginning, it's just like general. It talks about just animals and human interactions broadly.
Yes, thank you for sharing. So when we look at that section 1, section diagnostic, you'll see that as the broadest diagnostic, and it will filter students to get to the big ideas needed for that culminating task. And in addition, you'll also see through the section diagnostics that we have incorporated the writing revolution and a lot of their strategies throughout the lessons and both core and optional activities. And I saw a lot of those skills look for had to do with writing. So those TWR writing strategies are going to be what helps students build that ability to write a well-developed paragraph. The section diagnostics allows students to share what they've gained about specific relationships and experiences within the story. Yes, they do that as well. And it also gives teachers the opportunity to see, are my students understanding those knowledge building ideas that I'm presenting to them, and give them the opportunity to reflect on what they need to continue to build in future lessons. I do have a question from Kathy. How are the section quizzes that are currently in the units different from these section diagnostics? So the section quizzes are going to be geared toward those older versions of the units. So with these updates, you're going to notice that we have incorporated TWR writing strategies. We've also updated some of the text lists as well as the activities within the units. So if you want to use those section quizzes, from Learn Zillion, those quizzes should be previewed beforehand with the idea of what the new sections look like to make sure they're still relevant to those sections. I would not give those quizzes out blindly thinking about the previous sections rather than previewing these updates before making that plan. The section diagnostics are not the same thing as those section quizzes. So the section diagnostics are going to be specific activities where students are showing what they know about the knowledge and skills that have been presented so far in the unit. And then teachers can use those student samples to understand how to meet all of their students' needs, whether they have to accelerate some learning opportunities for students that are missing some knowledge for the units to access the text, or maybe they need to go back through some skills with the next text that's introduced, so that way the students can understand how to access those texts and be able to add to conversations as well as build on their own knowledge in their writing. So those are going to be two separate things. So definitely look through that evaluation plan and look to see what those section diagnostics are asking, and look through some of the exemplars as well that are presented in the unit. All right, if you have any other questions, please continue to put them in the chat and we will get to them as we see them.
All right, so we really wanted to give you guys some time to get an understanding of the updated evaluation plan, because that understanding is going to play a vital role in the work that we do later in this session. So now we are going to move into an overview of the core and optional activities and how they are connected to the section diagnostics. I want you to take a moment to review this quote that was published by Achieve the Core in the report Reading as Liberation, an examination of the research base. So as we dive deeper into the core and optional activities, we want to identify this as a personalized learning opportunity for students, with teachers creating those learning experiences that build upon their assets. The addition of core and optional activities allows educators opportunities to incorporate activities that provide all students with just-in-time supports to accelerate their learning and to meet their grade level expectations. As part of the updated units, each unit includes core and optional activities that build the knowledge, skills, and habits that students need to be successful in the culminating task. The core activity supports and optional activities can be chosen to provide just-in-time supports to accelerate student learning towards mastery of the unit goal. Core activities are indicated by a blue solid circle, and optional activities are indicated by an open white circle. So in order to get a better understanding of the core and optional activities, we're going to give you the next 7 minutes to review one of the updated lesson plans on the Louisiana Curriculum Hub for Because of WinnDixie. As you review these lessons, please respond to the 3 questions that are listed in part 2 of your participant guide. You may navigate the hub yourself, or there is a link to section 1, lesson 1 in your participant guide. Please be prepared to share your thoughts with the group after you have your individual work time. Is there any questions about this part? And again, we used a shared unit so that we could come to a shared understanding, knowing that we would have teachers from all different grade levels. However, if you would like to navigate the hub and look at section 1, lesson 1 of the grade level that you teach, you may do that as well. There's about 3 minutes remaining. Just a reminder that we are looking through section 1, lesson 1, and filling in part 2 of our guide, looking at what just-in-time supports are included in the core and optional activities and how they support students on the section diagnostic and achieving the unit goal. Hey, Clara, so I can clarify those pieces. So the section diagnostic and the unit goal was what we looked at in that first part of our session with the evaluation plan. So if you need to reference that piece, you may. The just-in-time supports are things that are like guiding questions or reference guides that may be linked, or building of background knowledge or skills. So those are those types of things you're looking for as you're looking through these core and optional activities, or what types of things are included throughout these activities that would support and accelerate student learning as it's relating to that unit goal, which we talked about was analyzing relationships and interactions. So where in section 1, lesson 1, are you seeing ways that these activities are going to support students in that understanding?
So we have a question in the chat about the lesson look fors. So the lesson look fors are going to be in a few places. When you click on because of WinnDixie, and you click on a lesson, you're going to see those look fors. Oh, thank you. Click on section 1, lesson 1. You'll see right there at the top, there's a section for lesson look fors. So these are going to be the lesson look fors for every single activity that's in this lesson. This is where we want students to get to. There's one other place that you'll also see that. So if you go back to the main page of Because of WinnDixie, you'll also be able to download the teaching guide. And on the teaching guide, you'll also have the student notes and teacher notes, and the look fors are at the beginning of each lesson as well.
Thank you, Allie. Okay. Oh, thank you so much. I already started seeing some responses here. So that's where we're going. I would love to hear from y'all. And before we get started on that, I just want to say thank you guys so much for being so willing to participate, because through these sessions, we learn a lot from one another. So I'd like to hear some thoughts on what type of supports that did you see in these activities that would help students for the diagnostic and the unit goal. You can unmute. I'll read some of the responses that I have from Elizabeth. There's some writing samples, sentence starters to help build paragraphs for sure, redirects within activities with strategies, preparing students to write paragraphs is definitely something that you'll see throughout with that integration of TWR. Feel free to unmute if there's any others that you saw that you'd like to share, or you can type them in the chat. All right, as y'all are continuing to type those, I'll go through a couple of pieces throughout section 1, lesson 1, where there are some in the moment or just-in-time supports for students. For example, activity 1 asks students to help by building background knowledge. where they can participate with an optional partner discussion with the question, can humans be best friends with animals? And getting kids to start thinking about this idea of relationships between humans and animals. Then in activity 2, we have a reading focus of what makes Fern decide to save the piglet. So we're giving students something to look for as they're reading. And then in 3, if you'll notice in the teaching notes, it has a section that says if students need support during the activity, and it gives teachers a list of possible supports that they could use in the moment if they are not able to answer those questions to the side where they are analyzing different relationships. Some of those supports are directing students to certain parts of the text in order to help with their comprehension. There is also the teacher talk moves that's referenced there to help students with those discussion pieces. And so there's many more activities throughout this lesson that would help students with those pieces. But what we really wanted you to see is that there are some optional pieces that you can bring in to help build background knowledge. Sometimes they will be writing based. And then there's also some supports in those teaching notes that you can use throughout lessons if you're seeing that students may need some opportunities to accelerate their learning in that lesson. I don't see any other responses in the chat. And if we don't have any pieces left here, we will go on to our next section. So now that we have a little bit of an idea of one section and one lesson and what those supports look like, we are going to take the next 7 minutes to review one of the updated lesson plans in the hub. So as you review these lessons, please respond to the 3 questions that are listed in part 2 of your participant guide. I'm sorry, y'all. I think I may be on the wrong. Wait, hold on. There we go. Sorry. So the next part of our session, we're going to work on selecting and incorporating those core activity supports and determining the optional activities. So if you look in, there we go. So each section has a section diagnostic with checklists and exemplars for teachers to monitor student understanding. The data that is collected from these checklists allow you to monitor student understanding to determine what just-in-time support students may need. So those supports that we talked about in the previous section. Take a moment to refamiliarize yourself with the section diagnostic from section 1 of Because of WinnDixie. We looked at this earlier in the evaluation plan, but I'm going to give you a moment to just relook at that piece. So if you see, just a reminder, in this lesson, students are going to read chapters 3 and 4 of Charlotte's Web, and they are going to continue to learn about Fern and Wilbur's unusual friendship. Students will also answer the question, how can friendships with animals be beneficial to humans and animals? And it will note in this that this is the section diagnostic. There are 2 different types of section diagnostic checklists that may be included. While both checklists contain reading look-fors to monitor knowledge of the content, the skill look-fors are specific to the type of task that students are responding to in writing or sometimes through a discussion. These checklists are completed for each student. Teachers may also use the data collection tool in order to identify trends in student thinking on the section diagnostic, create a summary of common areas of strength and areas to accelerate learning, and make a plan of action going forward. These tools are beneficial to teachers when selecting and incorporating core activity supports and optional activities. In a moment, we'll put you in 3 different breakout rooms to collaboratively examine your assigned tool. All the links and tools in your group assignments are included in part 3 of your participant guide. Please work with your group to respond to the questions in your participant guide and choose one person from your group who will be brave enough to share when we return full group. All of the links to these are included in your participant guide. And I'm going to put you in 3 different breakout rooms momentarily, and we'll work for 7 minutes on your specific guide. Group 1 will be breakout room 1, group 2 will be breakout room 2, and so on. Any questions before I place you in your breakout rooms? Okay.
Kara, there is a question in the chat asking which section does each group work on?
So they're listed, if you were in room 1, then you'll work in the group 1 that's listed in the participant guide. If you're in room 2, it'll say group 2, and then room 3 will do the third, and they're listed in the participant guide in that order. And I'll pop
Kara,
in.
please broadcast that to all of the breakout rooms. I think some people have already jumped to breakout rooms.
If we're in group 1, does that mean we do the first checklist or the first tool? Okay.
I'm not really sure. My principal was in here talking to me when she said we were going to do, so I'm not even sure what we're doing.
I think we are doing let me go back. I've got so many things open. I already hit the link, but we're doing on the participant guide, we're doing the first tool, which is the section diagnostic checklist, I believe.
Okay, it says that if you're in group 1, you'll work on group 1s.
Yes, if you look at page 2 of the participant guide, you'll see a table that says group 1 because of WinnDixie section 1 diagnostic written response checklist. That's the part of the table that you're working on.
Gotcha.
So it has some reading look-fors and some writing look-fors.
It also looks like
You can type it in the chat.
So I saw that the reading and writing look-fors had a rubric. I really liked that because I know we had the discussion, well, how are you going to do it? When are you going to do it? Are you going to do it for every student? But I think those questions could be either written down maybe and answered, and then that could be something that goes on maybe an assessment that has other questions from other sections on it. And the writing, I don't know. I thought the rubric, having a rubric for each day was a pretty neat tool. I do understand why people were, think there's not enough for that, but there's also not very many assessments made for us. So I think that it could be used for just a small point assessment.
Okay, thank you so much, Mary, for sharing that. So I love how you noted that those lesson look-fors are what you're going to see in that section diagnostic checklist. Looking at the knowledge and the skills that teachers are going to be looking for. So the written response checklist is one of those checklists that you may see for a section diagnostic. The other type that you may see is going to be the discussion checklist. So if there would be somebody from that group who'd be willing to kind of share what you discussed about how you would be able to use that to make instructional decisions. Because remember, we're framing this around how we use this data to choose core activity supports and optional activities, which we're going to look at just a moment in this session.
I was in that group looking at the diagnostic discussion checklist. Basically how we looked at it as if the students were unable to answer these questions, it told us, kind of what we needed to do because the answers can be found in the text by looking at blatant text evidence or even just taking knowledge from the text and using their own knowledge to put it forth. So it told us that, if they're unable to answer these questions that, text evidence might be an issue for them. So that would, tell us that we need to work on instruction in that area.
Yes, thank you so much, Claire. So being able to look at if students specifically are using text to support their answers is definitely something you're going to see later on when we look at core and optional activities, because it'll say if students are not able to find text evidence to support their response, here are some supports that you can give them in order to do that. So that's definitely a good one to note there. And I popped in that group for a moment, and there was some discussion about how do you do this for every kid whenever you might have a class of 25 to 30 participating in a discussion. So a couple of things that we talked about was the discussion tool that students are going to be able to use before a discussion to, one, express their understanding before the discussion, two, to capture their thoughts throughout the discussion, and then three, to put what can they now add to their understanding after the discussion would be a way for you to get that individual data that you're looking for if you aren't able to get to every kid depending on your class size. Also, we talked about kind of identifying those students that you really want to pay attention to in that discussion, either because they haven't been showing you the knowledge that you've been looking for throughout the lessons preceding that, and really kind of tuning your ear into them and during that discussion so that you can monitor their understanding as well. Thank you so much for sharing that. Our last group's tool is a little bit different in that this is a data collection tool that you can use to kind of summarize all that information that you've gotten from those checklists. So if there's someone from group 3 who would be willing to unmute and share, how can you use this data collection tool? How are you envisioning this in your classroom to help you with those core and optional activities?
Okay, I'll speak for group 3. One of the things is you break down the look fors in each lesson of the section when you're filling in the template to create it. So just in preparation will help the teachers make those decisions. Separating, when they look at the look for, separating between the knowledge and the skills that each lesson requires. And it'll, with the collection of knowing what students can do, what skill or needing knowledge, it'll allow the teachers to be very intentional and strategic in working to fill any gaps that students have.
Yes, thank you so much, Carrie. So basically that data collection tool is a way for you to synthesize all that data that you've collected for a section, put your kiddos in maybe some different groupings, and determine what you're going to do upcoming that's going to accelerate their specific learning needs. And I'm happy that you said that, because that's actually where we're going to go in that next part of our section is, now that we have all this data, what do we do with it? And so we're going to take some time in this last part here to look at some data. And before we even get to core and optional, we're just going to kind of look at it. So in part 4 of your note catcher, there is a class set of data for the Because of WinnDixie section diagnostic for section diagnostic 1. This part of the checklist is related to the knowledge that students should display by the end of section 1. I'm going to give you a minute to review the data and then respond to the 2 questions that are listed in your participant guide. Don't move on to the questions about core activity supports or optional activities yet. We're not to that point. I just want you to look at the data and just look at and jot down, what do you notice and wonder about this data? And then how might you be able to use this to inform instructional decisions coming up? Any questions about this part? I'm going to give you about 3 minutes to look at this data, and then we'll come back full group. We have about 1 minute remaining. Remember, we're just looking at the data piece from the knowledge checklist from Because of WinnDixie section 1 and noting what do you notice and wonder? And then how can teachers use this data to inform instructional decisions? You're going to need this information a little bit later on as we dig deeper into some of these activities. All right, I already see we have some responses in the chat, and Elizabeth has said that no one has got it yet. Like they haven't gotten to that knowledge that they need yet, and so they may need a little bit more background knowledge. If there's anything else that you noticed or wondered, if you don't mind unmuting or typing it in the chat, this will kind of help us frame our reference before we get started to this next section.
I was wondering kind of the same thing. I didn't read the chat, but the question about how well does the student describe Fern and Wilbur's friendship is being beneficial to them. I'm wondering if they didn't properly understand that question, mainly because of the vocabulary. I know my third graders would definitely ask me what does beneficial mean? What is it? So having that background knowledge, just the vocabulary could hinder them. And also if you were because I know the optional activity was the one that brought up the background knowledge of how animals and people benefit each other. If you skipped that definitely might need to be one that you need to go back to so you can enter into that discussion with the kids of how a person can help an animal and how an animal can help a person. So I think that's what that told me, at least. That's what I understood from it.
So that concept knowledge that was listed in there, that word beneficial, and what does that really mean, is definitely something that because you did see that there was more students who fell into that group that would need additional instruction when it came to being able to describe the benefits of both versus the students who were able to maybe just describe that interaction. And we know that second question is a little bit higher order because you're going from just describing interactions to then talking about the benefits of both. But it definitely tells you as a teacher that I may need to talk about what's beneficial. What does that mean? How can I bring that back in throughout the unit as well?
Right, because if they don't, I'm sorry, I was just going to say, if they
go.
don't understand the question, they're not going to be able to answer it accurately. And I know from my third graders, that one word would possibly throw them off.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think you're uncovering a big part of what we know as teachers is very important, and that is to preview what we're expecting them to do at the end of the section. So when we are unpacking a unit and unpacking a section specifically and tagging those knowledge and skills of the section diagnostics before teaching those lessons, that's where we have that opportunity to see, okay, this word beneficial is going to trip up my students. So where at in these lessons can I make sure I'm bringing up that term beneficial to make sure I'm exposing my students to that terminology to be able to access that question accurately. So that's definitely what we want you guys to be noticing in these section diagnostics and being able to annotate your teacher notes in and go back to how am I going to get my students to this point? What information do I need to give them to access these types of conversations?
Thank you, Allie. Yeah, and I definitely saw Deandra noted about front loading, like how can relationships be beneficial to students, maybe as part of a class discussion might be important before they move on. But keeping all of that in mind and that data for the knowledge part, we're now going to look at a separate piece. So with the class data we just discussed, I want you to look at section 2, lesson 1, because of WinnDixie. You may either navigate the Louisiana Curriculum Hub to find the lessons, or you can click on it in your participant guide. Respond to the next 2 questions. You may either, while reviewing the activities, respond to the next 2 questions in your participant guide. Be prepared to discuss with the group. So you're going to look at lesson 1, section 2, lesson 1. So now that we have collected some data from section 1 and we have some understandings of what our students need as far as their unique learning opportunities, we want you to take some time to look at section 2 and decide what core activity supports may students need and what optional activities would you include in order to accelerate student learning. And this is going to be the next piece of your participant guide right under the work that we just did. Any questions about that part? All right, you have about 6 minutes. Sorry, Allie, what you got?
Nope, you're good. I just want to build on just your ideas of the purpose of this, Tara, is instead of looking at it as I can go back to optional activities, it's more of a look ahead. So now I have this data from section 1. I'm going to preview section 2 and see how I can continue progressing and accelerating this learning and choose optional activities and those core activity supports that are going to support the data I have from section 1. I just wanted to reiterate that.
No, that's great. That's very helpful because there is definitely, that's why we're looking at the section 2, lesson 1 piece. All right, y'all, I'm going to give y'all about 7 minutes to look through these and then we'll come back and share. All right, y'all, we have about 1 minute left. And just a reminder that we're taking in consideration that data that we looked at from section 1 to determine going forward in section 2, what are some of those core activity supports we may need to include and what optional activities based on knowledge. So in a moment, you're going to look at skills, but right now we're focusing on that content knowledge. All right, we're going to come back together. And if you wouldn't mind either putting in the chat, you could link sorry, the activity number, or if you want to unmute and discuss what are some things that you notice that you may want to include upcoming in section 2 based on the needs of your students. I see Claire put the react to the text in lesson activity 5 because that's where they're describing the relationships between characters, which we see that most of our students in the beginning piece in section 1 were not able to do. Also the optional activity because it helps them engage in the text, and it also helps you gauge an understanding to see if they understood what they are reading. That's definitely a good piece to include. I would definitely do the TWR activities in the core and optional sections. Yes. And I know sometimes with TWR, if you think it's a writing strategy, but those writing strategies also support students in their content understanding as well, integrating those two pieces together. So definitely those are some great activities to bring in. TWR. So TWR is the Writing Revolution, and they have built out some progression of writing that is found in our units to support students through demonstrating their understanding. I can let Allie explain a little bit more if she would like to talk about TWR because she is the expert on that area as well.
I am, okay, I just didn't know what that acronym stood for. But I did sign up for the Writing Revolution webinar that y'all have coming up.
Perfect.
So.
Perfect. That webinar is going to be a great overview for you and how it's built out in the unit. Tara, can you go ahead and drop that link for the writing progression chart in the chat?
Sure.
I'm going to go ahead and reference a document that Tara is going to be dropping in for you guys to review at a later time. This has also been previously discussed in other presentations. So again, look for those recordings. But the Writing Revolution was integrated into the ELA guidebooks. And that is why we have leveled units now. So that way we can have students that start at the sentence level at the very first stage of the Writing Revolution strategies and work all the way through to writing paragraphs. So you're going to see that the writing strategies progress throughout the sections to get to the culminating task where students are writing paragraphs. With that being said, through every lesson, you have opportunities to work with a TWR strategy. And like Tara just said, those strategies are, yes, focused in writing, but they are embedded in content. So that content is having students analyze the text and use information from the text and support ideas that they are generating themselves, and then help them build stronger sentences, which will then build stronger paragraphs to respond to those culminating tasks or extended response questions.
And I linked thank you, Allie, for clarifying those pieces. So I linked the TWR progression chart as well. If you'd like to look through those, it has 3rd grade, 4th grade, and 5th grade with those leveled units as well. So we saw some activities that we could include for students in order to build their knowledge. And in just a moment, we're going to look specifically now at skills, because we talked about in the beginning that each section diagnostic is going to have a knowledge look for and a skill look for. So now that we've had some time to look at the knowledge piece, let's take just a moment to look at the skill piece. So in your participant guide, in the same section, if you scroll down, you're going to see a second set of data from the section 1 diagnostic of because of WinnDixie. I'm going to give you a moment, and we're going to do this all at one time. And we're not going to go into breakout rooms just for time purposes. We'll stay all together. Look through the data for the skill piece of this section diagnostic and complete what do you notice and wonder about it. And then thinking back to that section that you just looked at, section 2, lesson 1, what activities or supports may you incorporate to help with students to build the skills that they need in order to be successful on the culminating task? So we're going to take just 3 minutes to let you look through that data real quick and see, based on what you've already looked at, if there's some activities that you can identify or some supports that you can identify that would help students with the skill building.
Also, as you're noticing these things, you don't have to wait to add it into the chat. Just go ahead and drop it in as you're noticing.
You guys have about 1 more minute. If you want to make note of any of the pieces that you're noting that students could benefit from based on the skills. I see Claire responded that students are struggling with using the correct text evidence. Many students seem to think as long as they put something from the text, it makes sense and backs up their answer. That's definitely correct. And you probably noticed in some of those activity supports that it will state if students are struggling to find evidence to support their answer, these are some things that you can do. So that's definitely one of those in the moment, just in time supports that we were discussing that based on what Clara noted, her students may need if this were her students' data. So thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, so how to locate that correct text evidence. And you'll see later in those sections, it will say direct students to this part of the page, have them focus on this section of the text. So that's definitely important. All right, we have about 30 more seconds. If you have anything else you want to add. All right, so really, I just want you to think about that process that we just went through and think about how you can use this whenever you start with these updated units to make instructional decisions for your students based on the data that you're collecting throughout the unit. And just think about that process you had to go through today and how it could be beneficial for your students and for your decision-making whenever you are lesson planning going forward. So the last thing we're going to do today, in order for us to get some ideas about what you may need, is we're going to capture our learning on a Jamboard. So I'm going to drop the link to the Jamboard. And this will be helpful to us because there is part of it where it asks about any questions you may still have. Oh, thank you, Allie. So one thing you learned today, one question you still have, and then which one's changed that you will commit in having in your practice. This is a great place for you to put any questions that you still have about this process because we are collecting all these pieces and creating an FAQ document that we will send out. And then also I know for sure We're addressing some of those common questions that are coming up throughout these PD presentations.
And while they're working on the Jamboard, can you go ahead and progress to the next slide? So upcoming professional development opportunities. I know it was mentioned a little bit before, but the Writing Revolution is doing a 30-minute webinar on March 3rd at 9 a.m. This will be a very high level review of TWR integration into ELA guidebooks, and they will be expanding on this at Teacher Leader Summit. We have another professional development opportunity for specific to reference guides on March 11th at 9 a.m. And we also have a teacher collaboration. You may use the term PLCs at your school, but this is for those common planning times. So what should those common planning times look like? What kind of conversation should you have during that time on March 25th at 2:30? You can go ahead and progress one more time. If you guys have any additional questions or comments that you would like to share with us that we were not able to answer today or that you think of at a later time, please go ahead and email us at elaguidebooks@la.gov. We check this email every single day and we get you a response as quickly as possible. So please be open to sharing your thoughts with us. We're looking to collaborate with you and make sure that this curriculum is as easy to use and beneficial for you guys in the classrooms. We will be on for the next 6 minutes and taking any questions. If you would like to unmute or add to the chat, we'll be happy to stay on and answer any personal questions you may still have.